Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about savings. My name is Emily Trant. I'm Chief Impact Officer at WageStream, and I'm joined by Alex Henley, who is a wellbeing expert at the Co-op. Alex, thank you so much for joining me.
No, it's great to be here.
Before we jump in, I'm just going to give a little bit of context to set the scene, and then you and I are going to talk about our favorite conversation, which is workplace savings. We've been talking about it for years, so this should be nice and easy. But for those of you who haven't been talking about this for years, let me tell you why Alex and I are obsessed with this. And probably the biggest reason is we have a bit of a savings crisis in the UK. And there's some research from the Money and Pension Service that says that 1 in 4 people, so that's a quarter of the population, have £100 or less in savings. And people are always really shocked when I tell them that fact, because that's the whole adult population. I'm not talking about a specific demographic or a specific earnings profile or a specific type of work. A quarter of all adults have £100 or less. And in fact, what's even more horrifying is that for 17%, that number is zero. So there's no money in the bank account to sort of handle anything that comes up. And anything that comes up could be something that you need to handle, so sort of a financial shock, or it could be an opportunity like something on sale or a really great holiday or something lovely that you want to do. Um, and so having nothing is really problematic. Having just £100 gives you a little bit of a buffer in terms of handling those shocks. If you can stretch that to £1,000, that makes you half as likely to fall into problem debt. That's really material for people. Um, and we also know that as human beings, we're not great at planning for the long term or thinking ahead. And if you sort of wind back the clock to the early noughties, this was apparent when it came to pension savings, so long-term savings. And the government tried all sorts of things to get people to engage in pension savings. And the only thing that worked was doing it for people, automatic enrollment. They put in a ton of research, they ran lots of trials, and they tried to understand what would move the needle. They looked at all sorts of education and different interventions, and the answer was nothing other than doing it for people. And that's kind of where we've landed at with short-term savings as well. And Alex and I have been part of a multi-year research project looking at how do you get more people to engage in savings. And the same answer kind of comes through. You have to do it for them. You have to make it easier to save than to not save, because people have the will to save. They want to do it. They know they should be doing it. They're losing sleep over the fact that they're not doing it. But sometimes the hurdles feel very hard. Which account do you do? How do you open that account? Which is the best one for your money? What are the access conditions? How much can you afford to save? Can you get it back if you've changed your mind? What is the mechanism for moving that money? There's an awful lot of friction in the process. And again, research shows that people have these intentions and they fail to act on them. So this kind of inertia keeps them in place. And we've got some new research out at WageStream, which shows us even more clearly that when people are asked to agree or disagree with statements about financial well-being, everybody will agree that saving regularly is a good idea. But when you find out if they're doing it, when you ask, well, do you save regularly? You see a real divide, both in income profiles and in financial well-being. So those who have more wealth are more likely to have already translated that into action. And those who have translated it into action, regardless of their wealth, report higher financial well-being. And the reason why I'm telling you about this research is one of the reasons why it's hard to translate that into action is access and inclusion. So having access to an appropriate account or service that makes it really easy to save. And this is what we set out to solve together, Alex. But I want to zoom out first and have you step me through your entire approach to well-being, because savings is just one component of that at Co-op. And I'd love to hear more about your overall approach to your people, broader well-being, and financial well-being, and kind of how you landed on savings as being a key pillar of that.
Sure. To start right at the beginning, our co-op's vision is to build more value for our member owners every day. And our colleagues are really at the heart of how we achieve that. And of course, they're also colleague member owners, or 97% of them are colleague member owners. So we have to support our colleagues to drive our business forward. It's the culture of the organisation. It's what we want to achieve. Um, we want colleagues to feel, importantly, that they can really count on the support that we offer to them.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's things like personal growth, support with career development, fair pay, fantastic benefits, and of course, inclusion and well-being. All these things are in our kind of promise to colleagues, what we really want them to experience when they come and work for us. Um, and if they experience that, what we will find is our business will perform better. We will create more value for our members, 5.5 million of them across the country. Um, but we can't deliver on that promise without thinking really, really hard about topics like social mobility and financial well-being and how these things come together in the lives of our colleagues. They're really the factors that underpin um, underpin everything that colleagues bring with them when they come to work. And it's important that people can be their whole selves and not have to just be here to be this role and to complete this task. Um,
Yeah, you did something really unique, which is you did a really groundbreaking piece of research into social mobility. And yeah, could you talk a little bit more about that?
yeah, that's right, Emily. So we did a piece of research where we went through our business talking to colleagues from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and talking to them about the things that impacted on their social mobility, or had impacted on their social mobility journeys. So particularly, we talked to a lot of leaders that had come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, but have brought themselves into leadership positions at Co-op. Um, there were some really key messages in there, but for this conversation around savings, one of the critical ones is the benefits that we provide around financial well-being, whether that's savings with a credit union, whether that's the savings that we're going to talk about today, whether it's pension savings, they're all really key to creating the foundation which allows people to focus on their own growth, their own development, and their own progression. So if you don't have that financial well-being in your life, if you don't have that security, that bit of money that means that you can respond to something that's going wrong, it's very hard for you to find the mental energy to develop yourself, to look at the next job, to figure out what you need to do to get there and to achieve that and to go on and to grow. So financial well-being is a real key underpin of the social mobility that has been experienced by colleagues at our co-op.
And that really resonates, Alex, with broader academic research into how people experience financial stress and the impact that has on their available IQ and their ability to make positive decisions for themselves. So it's you're kind of describing this mental load where if you're constantly worrying and juggling about something, you give over cognitive capacity to those worries, and it consumes your bandwidth. It's a bandwidth tax, and it makes you less able to kind of focus on other things, but it also makes you more impulsive. And that's really problematic when it comes to financial well-being, because if you're being impulsive and you're making rash financial decisions, they affect your financial well-being even further. So it's sort of a negative spiral you can get caught in when things are very financially stressful.
That's right, and we often talk about that in terms of you can lose a number of IQ points effectively, but we talk to our colleagues about their financial well-being, and we get them to come and tell us where they're at. And one of the things that they're very good at saying to us is actually, when I've used some of the financial well-being benefits that you provide me, Co-op, I'm better able to do things just as simple as sleep. I sleep better, but I perform better in work. And I think half the colleagues that have used our financial wellbeing benefits are telling us that they perform better in their role day to day because of that. And that's because we take some of that load away from them and we free up that bandwidth that you're talking about to let people focus not just on their employment and what they can deliver for our co-op, but on themselves and the
Yeah.
things they want to achieve, which is incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people are people. They're not just there. They're not cogs in a wheel. They're not just there to do a job. They have their own kind of individual characteristics. And I find this fascinating because I spend a lot of time thinking about the behavioral science of money and the way that we make decisions. And we are very, very irrational beasts when it comes to money. We like to think we're very logical, but there was a data point. In fact, the Turner Commission dug this out. Again, thinking about pension savings, that only 0.5% of the population behave in a way that's economically rational, as in we do the things that economists will predict we should be doing based on, weighing up the costs and benefits of a decision.
Money is it's such a core part of who you are and the things that you want to achieve. You wake up in the morning and the only thing that you can do for free is breathe. Everything else costs money, and money is intrinsic to everything that we are, how we project ourselves, how we achieve the things we want to do in life, how we are able to feed our children or get the heating on. So many fundamental things come down to money that it's incredibly difficult for someone to behave entirely economically, rationally about the decisions that they make, because it's not, it may seem like a simple choice to save £3.50 on a cup of coffee to make a sensible decision like put that into your pension. It's incredibly difficult to do that. It's incredibly difficult because you don't work like that, and you can't work like that around money, because it's you constantly challenging yourself not to do the things that you want to do, not to be the person you are. So people aren't going to behave rationally, but we need to help people to make some decisions a little bit easier, and to help them to do some of the really core stuff a little bit more simply.
I think that's really important, Alex. And I think some employers are nervous about the perception of getting involved in the financial lives of their colleagues. Whereas, in reality, let's recognize that as employers, you are deeply entrenched in the financial lives of your workforce because you pay them, right? Like you are the number one source of their financial well-being. And so then taking that to the next step, inching that a little bit further forward to do something else to address their financial well-being is a really natural extension. But a lot of people feel uncomfortable with that. They feel like they shouldn't be doing that. You know, how did you reach that decision point where you were like, yes, we should be doing something, we should be supporting people to save, and it's right for us as an employer to be making that decision for people?
We asked our colleagues. It's the simple answer. We asked them, and they said, "We want your help with saving. We know it's really important. It's incredibly difficult to do. Can you help us?" And we talked to them about some of the things that we could do to help them. But for them, the idea they liked the most was the idea of auto save, the idea that we start you off saving, rather than you having to do that yourself. So they wanted that little leg up to get started. Um, in terms of how you reach the point as an organization, you have to accept that there are right ways and there are wrong ways to tackle every conversation. Um, and with this topic, because money is so intrinsically important to people, the only right way to do it is through empowerment. You've got to be there to help colleagues, to make their lives easier, to give them support and make things available to them. If you try and go at the conversation along the lines of, well, I want to make this benefit available to you, but I'm a bit worried that you might not use it in the best possible way, then you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to engage people. They're not going to feel that you're treating them like a grown up. The best person to make decisions about their money is them. It is our job to give them better tools to do that than they have available at the moment. So it's to help them do that. It's to give them better information. It's to help give them education and training and learning so that they can develop better behaviors, so that they can make better choices. And it's for us to help that process. It's for us to empower colleagues in that way. And if you view this as a key way that you empower colleagues in their own lives and in how they come to work and how they perform when they are in our stores, in our funeral homes, in our logistics centres, um, it it becomes a very simple thing to realise that it's support that you should do, you have to do, and it's going to pay back 100 times over.
What a powerful sentiment. I love that. I want to take that and I want to talk about workplace savings specifically and how empowering they are. But to do that, let me like duck into one of my favorite topics first, sort of the behavioral science of money. So I do this. I suspect you do this, Alex. I think most people do this. We assign different pots of money, different jobs. And even though money is completely fungible, a pound is a pound is a pound. It can do any job. A pound of pay, we might feel very comfortable spending that on bills or necessities or everyday living expenses. A windfall, like a pound of bonus that we got unexpectedly, or we won £10 on the lotto, we feel very comfortable splurging that on something not so necessary, or sort of buying something a little bit extra. And a pound of savings also has a really specific job to do. So savings might be there for just in case, like, oh, okay, something like, eventually the boiler's going to break and I'm going to have to replace it. And I've got my just in case fund, or it might be there for something more fun, like a holiday or Christmas presents or what have you. And we kind of assign these rules and we stick this money in different pots, and we feel very funny if we mix it up. We feel so funny if we take a pound of savings and we use it for everyday expenditure. Doing that on a regular basis makes us worry about money a huge amount. We've got some research that suggests that adds nearly a day a week of money worries when you take a pound from this bucket and you use it for something over here. We don't like doing that. It feels very weird. And then the other thing is, um, we are very sort of averse to loss. So if we have money and it gets taken away, that feels really bad. Whereas if we never had it in the first place, we don't notice it. And so there's some magical things that we can do with workplace savings when it comes straight from payroll. Because if money hits your current account and then you have to take it and move it and stick it into savings, you've reassigned a job to it. So you've changed that money's job, and you now feel like you're worse off because you don't have that pay available to you. Whereas if it comes off at the top of the funnel, so you've been paid, but before it hits your current account, it's sent somewhere else to a dedicated savings account. You don't really notice it. You don't feel that loss so keenly, and it's already got that new job you've assigned to it in your head. Am I making sense to you? Is this how you behave too, Alex?
Yes, yeah, very, very much. And it's trying to help colleagues to cut through some of those challenges, isn't it? That's really how we make this stuff successful. And this is why pensions weren't successful before automatic enrolment, or they were successful for a certain group of people that were used to having savings and used to managing the money because they had enough of it. But when you looked at pensions for frontline colleagues in a business like ours, maybe 20% of colleagues were signed up to our pension scheme before automatic enrolment. And obviously that's just transformed, because you have to help people make those shortcuts to where that money needs to be for them. And they want to do it. They just don't know how to do it because it's so difficult to think through those different pots and those different uses, and the different ways that your money is coming to you and how you want to distribute it.
Yeah, and pensions is a really good example because prior to auto enrollment, so you were saying it was about 20% in the co-op, kind of across the board, it was around 32% participation in private sector pension. So it was really low, and it's up over 75, close to 80%. So it was a big change bringing in auto enrollment. And that dealt with a lot of these behavioral biases we're talking about, whereas you kind of automatically assign it the job, you make it easy, you use inertia in somebody's favor. And so when it comes to savings, kind of, liquid workplace savings that you can access instantly or easily, we've sort of taken a leaf out of the pensions auto enrollment book and thought, well, what will happen? What will happen if we test the same? And so we've been working on this research trial for a couple of years to say, well, you've kind of already got this mechanism in place. You've got this mechanism, which is the employer through payroll is moving money on behalf of people. Um, how might we tap into that and test this other intervention, which is rather than moving money into a pension, which you're not going to see for a very long time, why don't we put it into a cash savings account, which you could use anytime you want, but we've helped you make that choice. Do you want to talk a little bit about, Alex, what we've uncovered through this research trial?
Yeah. And the first thing, the most important thing that we've uncovered, is that colleagues really like it. So setting aside everything else that you might want to learn people are really supportive of it, and they're supportive of it if it's right for them and they stay in and they want to use that, and they're supportive of it even if they think it's not for me, I'm coming out of that. I have other ways that I want to save my money, or I don't want to do this at all. But they still turn around to us and say, actually, I recognize the need. I understand why you're doing this. It is the right thing to do. It is the right way to support us. And that comes from across those people that love it and those people that actually it's not for them. So that colleagues like it and are supportive of it is really important, because I think as an employer, that's one of your very first worries. Are we going to create some disruption here in our business and a problem for colleagues and damage our relationship with them?
Yeah, that's a really important point. And I think because with savings, there's so much research to suggest that people want to save and intend to save, but have a hard time getting started. You're going with the grain of what people are already telling you they want. So it should feel very comfortable as an employer to do that. Um, but that was really good to hear. That was your first point, which was they appreciate it and they value it even after the fact, and even those who chose not to save because they still had choice to do so. So yeah, carry on. What else did you find?
um, I think that the second thing, and probably the most important thing, is it works. It does what we want it to do. So running autosave, you get 70% of colleagues signing up to save. If you don't run autosave, if you make that an opt-in, we get 16% of colleagues signing up to save. It's not closing the gap a little bit. It is taking a huge leap forward in that core and important behavior of just having that emergency saving, just having that pot of money, £100, £200, £300, that lets you navigate life so much more easily.
And so that gap from 16% to 71%, and by the way, 16% was already pretty good because most payroll savings programs on an opt-in basis perform somewhere like 1 to 5%. So it's the classic benefits team. You put something in, you work really hard at it, and hardly anybody takes you up on it. So 16% was, you were doing pretty well anyway, but getting that up to over 70% is huge. And do you have any understanding of who you were reaching? So that gap between 16 and 71%, what that looked like in terms of the sort of person who began to save, who wasn't taking it up before?
I think the key group is people that had never saved. So a third of those people, a third of the people that have taken up autosave and they'd never had savings before, they didn't believe they could do it. They didn't know how to do it. They found all those challenges that we were talking about earlier that stood in their way, those hurdles that you were talking about, that it's really difficult to step over. They were all in their way. And we got them started. And that's what they needed. They needed the beginning. They don't necessarily need you to hold their hand all the way through the journey, but if you get people started, it's transformative for them. And you can create a behavior then, because it's almost addictive seeing those savings build up over time. You've gone from a position where you've never had money to fall back on, you've never had a pot of money at all, and suddenly, 3 or 4 pay periods in, you're looking at £100. You've never had £100 like that other than on payday, and then it goes to all the things you spend it on. So you create that beginning of that process, and then they're interested in, right, I'm doing this really well. I might need to use some of this money, and that's fine. That's what it's there for. But it's that start, getting people going for the first time, and it's really important for us actually, because we have so many young people that come and work for us, probably their first kind of real job. So lots of people 16, 17, 18 that this is really important for.
And getting that start is so substantial, as you say, because it's such a powerful habit. Once you're doing it, once it's automated, even if you spend your savings, something comes up, something you want to buy, something you want to do with your money, next payday rolls around and it's replenished. So that habit keeps going for people. And what I found really striking in this piece of research was how emotional people were, how grateful they were, and this feeling of I didn't think I could do it, but now I can, was really life-changing for a lot of people. And to your second point, Alex, it then created this engagement with money in a really positive way because it's exciting to see those savings build up. And where you maybe previously would have not engaged with your money because you don't like what you're seeing or you don't think there's any point in engaging with it, this habit of engaging creates other habits. And you start to see people begin to budget better, begin to be more careful with their spending, begin to pay attention to their money, even begin to connect to the value of their work, like feel how hard they've worked for the money they've got and take more care with it. And so you just need something to start that behavior change process, and then it all starts to flow from there.
That's exactly right. And if you've never had savings, if you've never had any money behind you, it becomes something that you start to believe about yourself. You start to believe that I'm not a person that's ever going to have this. I'm not a person that has money. Even if one of those surprise bonuses that you talked about earlier, the idea that something happens that means you get a chunk of money, to think about it as something you should save versus you're not a person that ever has money. You've got it now, so you should spend it now on trying to do some of the things that you want to do, because your expectation is you won't have money again, because that's what your life has been like. So it's changing that and showing people that you can be the person that has some savings, and it grows from there.
Yeah, changing how people see themselves. And we're making this sound really easy, and to an extent it is, but to an extent it isn't, because what we're talking about here is a research trial run by Nest Insight and with the data analysis done by an academic team from Harvard University and Yale University. And we ran this as a randomized controlled trial. So we had three different groups of people. People were randomly assigned to each group. And everybody had the same choice. Everybody had the choice to save or not to save. So nobody had their choice taken away from them. But in one group, we did it for them automatically, and we presented it as a done deal. And we said, congratulations, you're saving. If you don't want to, you can take these steps. In another group, we just gave them a bit of a poke and we said, hey, would you like to save? And in the third group, we did nothing. We just let them continue to choose to save if they discovered it themselves and wanted to go ahead and make that choice. What was interesting in this piece of research was that that middle group, that nudge where we poked them and said, hey, do you want to do something, really wasn't effective at all. And in fact, it tracked pretty much at the baseline, at the control, and sometimes even below it. Sometimes kind of that nudge of saying, hey, do you want to do this, almost made someone think, no, I definitely don't, um, and they kind of never came back to it, which I was surprised. I don't know if you were expecting something different from the research, but I certainly was.
I thought we might see a bump, that we might see a few more people who responded to that, and because they were asked the question, went on to do something. That it was exactly the same as if you just have to go and figure this stuff out for yourself was really eye opening. Just asking the question and prompting people. I think a lot of people think that that's the most an employer should do, is just nudge people a bit. Nudges of that type don't work. You've got to use something really strong if you're going to change such a challenging behavior as saving.
Yeah, and the other thing that we worked on behind the scenes as part of this research trial was how do we take friction out of the savings journey? Because right now, if you go to open a bank account, you're going to have to provide some paperwork. You're going to have to provide some identification. There'll be KYC or know your customer checks that you know, financial services providers, they're legally obliged to do that as part of the anti-money laundering regulations. Um, and so you've kind of got a bunch of necessary friction in the system. And one of the things that we looked at, how we might use the moment of signing up to the WageStream app, where somebody was already providing some information to sign up and download that benefit, to take out some of that friction. So to collect the information directly from the employer and from the individual so that we could move all of that in your face process to kind of behind the scenes and run it in the background. That was a really important, I think, lesson for us in the trial, which was the value of taking that friction out of all the journeys.
I think that's right, and it's a lesson that pensions automatic enrolment shown us very well, because that is an environment where you do not have to do all of these KYC checks. Your employer knows who you are. They check your right to work, and from there, you can move into that pension scheme. They're legally required to put you into that pension scheme.
Yeah.
So frictionless journeys can be created, and employers are a key part of doing that because you already have that relationship with the person. You know who they are. You've been through a hiring process. So if you think about ways that you might want to create a frictionless, easy savings account outside of the employer environment, it becomes harder because you don't have that way to do that.
And the particular value of payroll savings, if we're getting into some of the technical details and talking regulation, is the source of funds, where the money is coming from. So these regulations, this friction, they're designed to protect the financial system from being abused and for being used for illegal purposes. So they're really important. They need to be in place. But when you know that the funds are coming from the co-op's payroll file, the co-op's payroll process, that is a legitimate source of funds, and you can operate in a little bit of a closed environment where you can potentially take a lighter touch to meeting some of these requirements because you've offset the risk by doing it through the employer channel. So that's what makes the workplace really powerful here versus an individual going and trying to do this, using a high street bank or other savings institution where nobody knows where that money has come from. And so there is a sort of a greater degree of verification that needs to happen.
That's right, and I think one of the challenges here is it isn't a really simple, straightforward thing for an employer to go and make this happen at the moment. We're getting better at creating these, an auto save scheme, and deploying it to every colleague at our co-op, though, isn't something that we could achieve at the moment. And we really need a bit of help, probably from the government, to create an environment where it becomes easy and simple for employers to put these schemes in place. So if you have a benefits provider that has done this before, then they can help you to craft something. They can help you to shape something. But you won't be able to reach every colleague, and really, we need to reach every colleague. And that's where we're going to make the sort of the real difference, the big difference. So I think employers and providers and government need to talk to each other about how to create a even more friction-free environment, one where we can really do something brilliant for people.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. So moving from lab to field, basically. So from a research pilot to how do you scale this in the real world? And I guess the first thing to say is payroll savings exists as a concept, workplace savings. There's lots of different ways you can do that. There's no drama with offering an opt-in payroll savings product, because then you're getting people to provide the data, give the consent, sort of jump through all the hoops that are necessary. And even doing that on its own is a good thing. So there's some research that suggests that if it's offered through payroll, people are 46% more likely to save because you've taken one of the choices kind of out of the mental load. You've sort of said, we've selected this provider and this product. Here's one that we've vetted and we've done our due diligence. It's one we think is appropriate. So that's actually a big hurdle in terms of just selecting a provider and a savings product for people. So that can be done right now. No dramas, no changes needed. But again, they're not that effective. So usually between 1% and 5%, you were doing really well at 16%. The kind of what is the art of the possible? So how might, short-term savings look a little bit like pension savings? Again, there's all these friction points that we need to overcome. And that really will require regulatory change. So right now, if you open a bank account that has FSCS protection, everyone sees those four letters everywhere, that £85,000 FSCS protection. There are obligations that bank has to meet under its licensing from the Prudential Regulation Authority to make sure that they've informed you as their customer, that you understand the terms of opening the account. There's a number of clicks and friction points on that journey. But what we want to work on together, and this is sort of a call out to employers and to government and to regulator, is how can we take down some of those barriers and how can we use that employer channel for short-term savings in the same way we've done for pensions? Because if you can open a long-term investment vehicle for somebody without all that friction, you've got to be able to open a short-term vehicle for them. It just feels like an obvious thing to do.
How we can help, how we can further. We need to have the conversations that we have with policymakers. But on top of that, I think the key thing is we've got to do more of this. Within the boundaries that we have at the moment, we have to get autosave in front of as many colleagues as we can, so that when people are talking about why this matters, we can stop talking about a trial that we ran that created an amazing data set and proves that it does what we need it to do. And we can talk about how we've gone on from that, how we've built it, how we've put it across more of our colleagues, more people at co-op, more people at other employers, and then hit the buffers that naturally exist. And then you say to government, we've done all we can and it's not good enough. There's more good that we can do here. And that helps us with that conversation. And I think it gives people peace of mind as well. So I think one of the key things for us at Co-op is how we build on the trial that we've done, how we get autosave in front of more colleagues, and start to create the volume that makes people say, this is not just research, this is real world, and it's really effective. And we shouldn't need to do that. We have the evidence base, but people don't always think in the way that we'd like them to think. And so I think that for us is what we can do. And that's where every employer can play a role.
Yeah, and that's important, Alex. And that's what we're doing at WageStream. And we've been working with you on this along the way, which is how do we go from trial to real world? And how do we take the best of everything we learned in that trial and apply it in an environment where there is this regulatory scrutiny and there are these friction points and barriers. And what we have done is we have taken our savings product out of the trial environment and stuck it in the real world. We've plugged in a really great banking backend in there. It's offering a 4.7% AER interest rate. And in fact, it's a really great rate that you can get it on the open market if you have a £5,000 deposit. But within the WageStream universe, you can get it for £1. So we've taken something that's designed for people who have more wealth and made it available for any worker who's got even just £1 to put aside. And taking the theory of that opt-out approach, we've designed that journey so that the lowest effort choice is to save and the highest effort choice is not to save. And so in keeping with regulation, there's still a click that needs to happen. We haven't been able to make it completely automated in the way we ran the research trial. And that click does impact things. So that click will take you down from about a 70% to sort of 55, 60% success rate, which is still a really impressive success rate in terms of getting over half of a workforce saving. But using that learning, using that knowledge to try and say, well, why don't we flip things on their head? Why don't we make the happy path the path where people do save, and that's the easiest choice to make. And if they don't want to, we put a little bit more friction in their way. And so we're really excited to be rolling that out and gathering a bigger pool of data to say, well, this is working in the real world. This is working at scale across the co-op colleague base and many more. And here's what it looks like. But the gap between what I'd call sort of a pure opt-out, like pensions has, where you do nothing, you see nothing unless you want to get involved in the process, and I'd call sort of like half opt-out, where you are mostly automatically enrolled, but there's still a moment where you have to push a button. That gap is still, it's not as big as the 16 to 71, but there's some work to be done to close that gap for sure.
There is, but if you think about where we were 2 years ago, we were at the 16, and now we have a way to 50%. And that's incredible progress. That's incredible progress. But it's got to get into the hands of more businesses so that more colleagues benefit. That's the key thing. And okay, 55% versus 70%. It sounds like it's a small difference, but it's thousands of people. In a business like ours, it's thousands of people. In the population at large, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And they need help and they need support. So I think we shouldn't be satisfied with 55%. We should be really, really happy, and you should be so proud of creating something that can achieve that. But I still think we need to reach further.
Absolutely. And I think my kind of call out to everybody watching this is please come and partner with us because we're looking for companies to partner with us and to help us fine tune even further until we push that as far as it can possibly go and until we've built that base that we can take back to the government, take back to regulators and say, here is the impact we can have. And here is the impact gap and help us close that impact gap so that we can do better and so we can reach everybody, especially those people who didn't think they could save, um, and get them saving. And you know, anything we can do to build that evidence base and to work with really cutting edge employers who want to help come with us and push the boundaries. We have a whole team dedicated to making this better. It's a really exciting time. We're building on some fantastic evidence that you helped us create, Alex, and I think we can go much further than we have today. This feels like a sort of a moment to wrap up. I think we're kind of running on time anyway. It's been really interesting talking about where we started from, sort of 1 in 4 people not even having £100, the potential of where we can get to, which is 70%, over 70% of a workforce saving. We didn't even talk about average balances, but we were seeing after month 4, the average balance was £100. After month 8, the average balance was £200. So people were spending their savings, but they were genuinely building up a buffer in a way that we hadn't seen before. Um, the taking this to the real world and beginning to scale it. So we've had to make some adjustments to the research environment to make it work in the real world, to kind of respect regulation. And of course, we have to do that. But like again, really saying, come with us and help us change the landscape of UK savings. The more employers, the more people, the more weight and data behind this, the more likely we'll be really listened to by the Labour government and the regulator. I just want to maybe ask you for one last thought, Alex, as we wrap off. Um, you know, we've talked a lot about savings, you've talked a lot about social mobility and the co-op and kind of your rich history of looking after people. If there's one thing you want people to take away from this, what is one thing you want people to know about the role of well-being or the role of savings in the lives of the typical worker? What would that be?
One takeaway, I think I think what I'd choose is the link between money and mental health, which we haven't really touched on. We've sort of drifted past it today in this conversation. But the proportion of people who have a mental health challenge, who need help, who need support, the proportion of them that come with a financial well-being challenge as well, I think it's about half, is incredibly significant. We're much better at talking about mental health than we are at talking about money in businesses up and down the country. But if we don't tackle these kind of issues, if we don't create those safety nets that savings provide, then all of those things that we think we're doing well at around mental health will not succeed to the degree that they could. So I think that the link between money and mental health and happiness and your ability to achieve the things you want in life, it's incredibly important.
It's huge. And you know what? That reminds me of a piece of feedback I got last week from one of our app members. And it was 3 words. And they said, I feel valued. And I can't think of any more powerful 3 words. And I can't think of any other workplace program or benefit or initiative that creates that same emotive response of I feel valued, helping somebody achieve their savings goals and achieve their well-being made them feel valued as a human being. And I thought that was so powerful. Um, Thank you so much for the conversation, Alex. You know, I can talk about savings all day long. It's been really interesting. I'm sure that people out there have questions, maybe for you on your experience of implementing the savings research trial, or for me more broadly on what it might look like to roll this out within a workforce. So please send your questions in. We will get back to you kind of one on one and make sure that we've answered them for you. And thank you so much for listening along today.